Chase Young is joining the New Orleans Saints. That's the news we got this Monday to make it a little bit more exciting to start off this week. So it is a one-year deal. This changes a lot for the Saints, the draft, the defensive setup, what it means for the future. Let's talk all about that right here on the Straight Up Saints podcast.
You're listening to the Straight Up Saints podcast.
What is up, Huda Nation? Welcome back inside another edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast. I'm your host, Chris Vogel, and as always, we're brought to you guys by Scott Vicknair Injury Lawyers. Who've been injured in any kind of accident, car, truck, 18-wheeler, hurt offshore. Scott Vicknair handles it all. You give him a call at 504-500. And what I want to just put out too here real quick for you guys, outside of Scott Vicknair Injury Lawyers, we also are brought to you by DraftKings Sportsbook. And with the NCAA tournament coming up, we got something fun for you guys in just a minute. So I'm going to be honest. I did not expect the deal to get done this Monday afternoon, particularly with Chase Young. I know he was visiting with the Saints today after rescheduling, and I just didn't anticipate the deal getting done this quickly. But this is great news for the New Orleans Saints for a plethora of reasons. But let's get into the specifics, and then we'll talk about why I think this is a home run for the Saints. And the first thing is the deal. 1 year, $13 million, fully guaranteed. So I think when you hear that, there really isn't much risk, right? You're paying a lot of money up front, and I'm very curious to see how the Saints break it down. They can go really, really mature, which would be different from what they do, and say, hey, here's the money this year and not add void years. That would make them a little bit more responsible in terms of the cap situation for future years, but they could add void years, and if they want to do that, it's not going to be that much of a penalty for them. So we'll see what happens, and I am very, very curious to see what they break down. So 1 year, $13 million fully guaranteed. Chase Young, as we all know, former number 2 overall pick out of Ohio State, former defensive rookie of the year. He was great with the Commanders as a rookie. Injuries provided a little bit of a setback, to say the least. And then he gets traded to San Francisco last season. And, I expected him to really take off with the 49ers. Now, I'm not going to say he was terrible, but he wasn't what I expected, especially when you're across from Nick Bosa. I would expect greatness. He didn't necessarily do that, right? In the 9 games that he played, just going to pull up the stats real quick, 10 tackles, 16 pressures, 2.5 sacks. Now, the whole season, though, 7.5 sacks. And if I were to compare that with the guys on the Saints, he would pretty much be your go-to sack artist outside of Carl Granderson. So when I hear that, it makes me think that, man, look, you don't have to like Chase Young, but he definitely will give you something that this defensive line needs. That's A, talent, B, youth, and C, a guy that has proven to be a playmaker. Now, it isn't consistent. There's effort questions. There's inconsistency questions. But again, it's a 1-year deal for Chase Young. So why do I love this deal outside of the financials that I mentioned? I think it gives you tremendous draft flexibility. I'm going to be honest. I know it's not what Saints fans want to hear, but prior to this signing, I was thinking that pick number 14 has to be a defensive lineman because you can't trust Peyton Turner. You can't trust Isaiah Foskey, and Cam Jordan's getting older. So that's 3 concerns from your D-line. Now, does Chase Young fix everything? No. I mean, we have to see if he can. Can he reach his full potential? And if he does, boy, we'll talk about an extension, not about how good this signing was. We'll be focused about the future. But in the moment right now, what Chase Young allows you to do is look at pick 14 a little bit different. Do I want to go interior defensive line? Do I want to go offensive tackle? Do I want to go wide receiver? Do I go tight end if Brock Bowers falls to 14? All these options are on the table. And that doesn't mean the Saints can't go defensive end. If Dallas Turner falls to 14 and that's the number 1 guy on their big board, go grab him. You can never have enough defensive line talent. That said, I think when you look at the Saints situation, you're thinking more offensive lineman or you're thinking another offensive weapon. And that's the way I'm going to look at it right now at pick number 14. And that's because Chase Young gives you that flexibility. And also, Chase Young's only 24 years old. So it's like adding another young defensive lineman to your roster that you can kind of mold and get the best out of. But guess what? This guy has played in the NFL for multiple years now, and can get the job done. You just got to find a way to get that fire lit under him. If you can do it, that's going to bode well for the Saints. Now, another thing that I thought about with this deal, and I'm not saying this is going to happen, but we've seen the Saints strike gold in a situation like this before. I remember when the Saints signed Nick Fairley. We've seen the talent, right? We saw it on display in Detroit, but there was inconsistencies. And then he goes to St. Louis, and he didn't really live up to the potential. And everyone knows Nick Fairley out of Auburn was a really talented defensive lineman and had that potential. And it wasn't until he got to the Saints that he really hit that full ceiling. And unfortunately, he had the injury concerns, or else he'd probably have a really nice career with the Saints because he hit that potential in New Orleans. So I look at Chase Young, and obviously they're not the same position, but they're both defensive linemen. They're both really, really potential packed players. And you felt like, man, there's a superstar in there. I just got to find a way to get it out of him. And the Saints did it with Nick Fairley. Injuries cut that short. We'll see if they can do a similar thing with Chase Young, where you bring him into New Orleans and you get the best out of this player. Now, the last thing I'll get to before I get to you guys, because I want to know what you guys have to say about this, and we'll get through your comments, and that's kind of how we'll keep this one not as long as a post-game live stream, but long enough to get your thoughts in and hear what the Who Dat Nation has to say, and I'll get to those in just a minute. I think that this deal, another reason to love it, if this works out, the Saints are going to fix their biggest weakness, in my opinion, while not spending that much money for a long-term commitment, and also saying, hey, we're just going to buy low on talent, and that's a good thing to do. If it doesn't work, because there are questions about the consistency, there are questions about the effort, because again, this was a player who, in the NFC Championship game, the energy wasn't there. And if your energy's not there in an NFC Championship game, I don't know what to say. Like, that's a little bit confusing, right? That should not be an issue. Guess what? It's a one-year deal. So if the Saints fall flat on their face and all the optimism that's kind of flowing through us right now immediately just evaporates when week one rolls around, guess what? You're not tied to him past 2024. So I think that's the beauty of a deal like this. If it works out, we can start talking about, can they keep Chase Young long-term? If it doesn't work out, we don't got to worry about Chase Young being there long-term because he's going to hit on the open market. But I do think you take a player like this, who is only 24, who will, from a, I would say, leadership standpoint, is going to learn a thing or two from Cam Jordan and Demario Davis. Maybe this is the opportunity for him to kind of get under their wing and realize he could be that next pass rusher that gets paid in 2025 if he does his job in 2024. So I really like that. And I think this adds a little bit more depth to the D-line right now. You know, you look at this defense, you have questions about Cam Jordan, you have questions about Foskey, you have questions about Peyton Turner, no doubt about it. But at least right now, you feel like you're going to start Carl Granderson on one end, you're going to start Chase Young on the other end, and if Cam Jordan can, bounce back from a disappointing 2023 season, great. If Isaiah Foskey can give you something that he didn't give you in his rookie year, awesome. If Peyton Turner could just stay healthy, because I really think he could play, I just don't think he could stay healthy, even better. So you got two defensive linemen now that you feel somewhat good about. Granted, there are concerns about Chase Young. I can't act like it's all, sunshine and rainbows when it comes to him. There are concerns, but you got two guys that will start, and you're hoping that one of these other guys can find a way, whether it is Cam, whether it is Foskey, whether it is Peyton Turner, to give you that extra juice. And if you can do that, then you really like where the defensive line is heading. So I'm excited about this. And look, another thing that the Saints did, which kind of got overshadowed by Chase Young, they also signed Oli Udoh. So you get another offensive lineman in. He'll kind of give you some flexibility at guard/tackle. He has started a lot in 2021. So it's been a busy Monday for the Saints, but obviously the focus is on Chase Young. And keeping the focus on Chase Young means we're going to get to your comments. But before we do that, I just want to get a quick word from one of our sponsors, DraftKings Sportsbook.
The thrill and excitement of March Mania is here, and DraftKings Sportsbook, one of America's top-rated sportsbook apps, is giving new customers a shot to turn $5 into $150 instantly in bonus bets with any college basketball bet. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code BOOT. New customers can bet $5 to get $150 instantly in bonus bets, only at DraftKings Sportsbook with code BOOT. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit 1-800-GAMBLER.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and over, age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. See dkng.com/promos for eligibility and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gaming resources.
Once again, thank you to DraftKings Sportsbook for being part of the program, and Scott Vicknair Injury Lawyers, which you can give a call at 504-500-1111. So let's get into whatever comments you guys had here on this Monday. We're going to start off with Destin saying, any chance Cam Jordan moves to defensive tackle or situational defensive tackle so Granderson and Young can do their things off the edge? I don't really think he needs to do that. I think when you look at this Cam Jordan situation, I think you're looking at the defensive line as a whole. And I think when New Orleans is at their best, it's with the depth, right? I could go think back about having Cam Jordan, having Trey Hendrickson, having Marcus Davenport. You're not thinking about, well, who's the odd man out? You're thinking about that as a collective unit and how good can that collective unit be? And I think that's the way you're going to look at this situation. Now, Is Chase Young going to take some snaps away from Cam Jordan? Absolutely, because the way Cam Jordan played last year, that is not a guy who you can have on the field consistently on third downs. But do I think this moves Cam Jordan defense tackle? I don't know about that. Look, I know Cam's still good against the run. I think Cam can still give you moments of good football. I just think that he obviously is towards the tail end of what could potentially be a Hall of Fame career. But I don't know about moving him to defensive tackle. I don't know if that will happen. Paper Chaser saying, who dat? Jerry G saying, we got Chase Young. Jordan saying, let's go. More let's goes and who that's in the chat. We're going to get over to Paper Chaser saying, Bowers or trade back and get more picks. Look, the trade back and get more picks sounds great. And I think for a Saints team that is trying to be financially responsible this offseason and add talent without really putting themselves in a burden for future years, trading back sounds great, right? Because you have more shots at getting a rookie in there that can make an impact. And I think if the Saints are going to fix this thing and they're going to make themselves a competitive team for years to come, they got to have another great draft, right? We think of 06, we think of 2017. And I know those don't grow on trees. They don't. They just don't. Those are historic draft class. But if the Saints are going to get back to being a really, really respectable team in the NFC, you got to have a good draft where you could get 3 to 4 impact players in there that make a huge difference. And what better way to do that than having more cracks at this draft? And trading back would do that. That said, it's not the Saints' MO. So I'm not going to think that they're going to do something they've never done before. I think they're far more likely to trade up than they are to trade back because that's just been who Mickey Loomis is. But I don't hate the idea. As for Brock Bowers, I've said it before, and I'll probably say it about 1 million more times, especially because we're getting closer to the draft, right? Little over a month out. Brock Bowers, I think, is the type of weapon. You put him in the Saints offense, man, the complexion of it looks a lot different, you know? You got a guy in there that you can move around the line of scrimmage. You could get him over the middle of the field to make plays. And Brock Bowers is the type of guy, freshman year at Georgia, like true freshman, looked like many times the best player on the football field. So I'd love to see a weapon like that in New Orleans. You put him with Olave, you put him with Shaheed. Obviously, still got Alvin. You're hoping Kendrick Miller takes that next step. You hope A.T. Perry takes that next step. So you got a lot of young talent. You're hoping they break through. And if they do, who knows? But I definitely do not dislike that idea. I love the idea of adding Brock Bowers to the Saints. Alex says, do you think this takes them out of drafting a defensive end? Feels like defensive tackle, O-line, and maybe wide receiver would be the way to go in round one. I think in round one, it definitely takes them out of it unless Dallas Turner falls, because it seems like, just from kind of paying attention to all the smoke surrounding this team, it seems like Dallas Turner's a guy they like a lot. So if Dallas Turner falls to 14 and the Saints say, hey, he's the best guy on our board, they should take him. Like, that's the way they should be operating. The Saints should be in the business of getting the best possible football players on their team. So that's how I view it. That said, I do agree with you. I think that wide receiver, I think O-line, I think defensive tackle, those make a lot of sense. I would not be surprised. And we'll see what happens, right? Because if the Saints sign another veteran receiver, then I think we could kind of take them out of taking wide receiver in the first round. I would not be surprised if it's offensive tackle at 14, defensive tackle at 45, or switch them, whatever you want to do, and the Saints go for the trenches to figure that out. Because I think if the Saints get better in the trenches, they're going to be a better team in terms of being more competitive. Does it mean the record's the same? I don't know, but there are a lot of games where the Saints just got completely demolished in the trenches. I think of the first Atlanta game. I think of the first Detroit game. So, you got to get better there, and I think that's where they kind of go. Alex also says, hopefully Chase is motivated and plays up to his potential, playing for a big contract next offseason. Yeah, the thing about the motivation factor, I would say, is he should have had all the motivation in the world this past season. You're due for a new contract. You get traded from Washington, which is picking number 2, to the NFC champion in general of the San Francisco 49ers. And this is what I will say about Chase Young, though, because the inconsistency and the effort thing is a bad thing. But he got called out after the NFC Championship game, and I thought he looked really good in the Super Bowl. So what I can say about him is he did respond well to the criticism. He did respond well to the challenge. I just don't want the Saints to be in a position where they got to challenge this kid, and I shouldn't say kid, even though I am older than Chase Young, but they don't want to be in this situation where you want to constantly have to challenge his effort, his motor, and get the best out of him that way. They have to, so be it. It's football. You're trying to do whatever you can to get the best team out on the field. But I do want to give him credit. Like, as much as I want to knock him for saying he did not show enough effort in the NFC Championship game, he did look like one of the better players out there at the Super Bowl. Balled it and bounce our way. I mean, they're a player or two away from Chase Young coming to the Saints and being a Super Bowl champion under his resume. Nat says, great move. Keep building the defense. She also says, let's go Pelicans. And that is right. Pelicans, playoffs coming up, man. And that is a damn good team right now. Who that dude says, I agree. Go get offensive tackle or wide receiver at 14. And he also says Ohio State South. Yeah, it kind of is cyclical, right? You lose Michael Thomas. So there goes one Buckeye. In comes another. Now we got to see what happens with Marshawn Lattimore, because that is, the next question for me. I'll go as far to say this. You add Chase Young, right? If Marshawn Lattimore stays, I think the secondary is going to be phenomenal, because I think it's very hard to match a secondary that will have Marshawn Lattimore. They'll have Alontae Taylor. They'll have Paulson Debo. I just don't think there's a lot of teams that can match those three cornerbacks. If one of the defensive linemen opposite Carl Granderson can do their job, and I know it's a big if, but let's say one of them does, that opens so much. Because I think this linebacker group is going to be better just off adding Willie Gay, because he gives you speed, he gives you versatility, he gives you a guy that goes downhill, and trust me, Dennis Allen will use that aspect. So I think this opens up a lot of things, and my focus kind of shifts towards Marshawn. What happens? Does he get traded? Do the Saints work it out? I'd like to see them work it out, because I think they're going to be a better team with Marshawn Lattimore on the field. If not, hopefully they get good compensation so they can continue to be competitive while rebuilding at the same time. Ed says, I worry about Chase Young's motor. I worry too. No doubt about it. But, this is a gamble that the Saints have to take, and I really don't even think it's much of a gamble. The way I see this move with Chase Young, and I'm going to have to go with my kind of degenerate side to do this, I see it as the deal we're showing a 5, you got an 11, you got a double. It's the right move, okay? And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, but you got to make that move because it is the right move. And I think bringing in a talented Chase Young at 24 years old on a 1-year deal is the right move. If it doesn't work out, he's gone. If it works out, we're going to be like, man, Mickey Loomis made a hell of a move by bringing him in here. So I definitely am for this. And I say this as someone who, when the Saints were linked to Chase Young, I said they got to be careful. You don't just sign him because you're desperate. It's got to be a contract that makes sense. You can't make a long-term commitment because there is that motor question. And I commend the Saints for doing exactly what I had hoped for. And look, sometimes I'm wrong. I do not think I'll be wrong in this case. I think this is a good deal for New Orleans because there really isn't much risk. Libby says, I like what we're doing on defense. Yeah, look, the Saints have not had a great offseason in terms of excitement, right? Adding Nathan Peterman does nothing for the fan base. Adding, Stanley Morgan does nothing for the fan base. Adding Willie Gay, adding Chase Young, both of them on 1-year deal. Both of them really, really talented players. One is a former defensive rookie of the year. The other one's a former second-round pick, I believe, or third-round pick. I got to remember where Willie Gay was selected out of Mississippi State. Those are talented guys. One of them has played on a team that has won back-to-back Super Bowls. The other one just played on a team that got to the Super Bowl. So you add playoff experience to this team. You add 2 young talents that are looking to finally find that home that can be that long-term spot for them. So I like that. I think defensively, the Saints have had a quietly decent offseason defensively. Now, I think they need to get better at safety. I think you got to add another defensive tackle. So there's still other things that they got to do, but I think they've done a decent job, at least in the front 7, of adding 2 potential pack players. And if just one of them hits, you'll see a big difference. You absolutely will see a big difference. Got Rachel saying, woo, Chris is back. Yay, who dat, guys? Yeah, look, I as soon as this one came out, I was like, I could do a video, could go live stream. I think live stream was definitely the option here, especially because this is an exciting signing for the Saints. This isn't like them bringing in, a lesser player. And no knock on a guy like Stanley Morgan, but when you make a signing like that, the first thing people say is who, not woohoo. So this is the type of signing that you get excited for, and rightfully so. And I definitely wanted to come out here and chat with you guys and at least get to see what you guys are thinking about with this move. Rose City says, so is Payton the odd man out, and is the new tackle any good? So let's go with the first question. Is Payton the odd man out? I'm going to be honest. I think the Saints just let the health of their players and the performance of their players decide who's the odd man out. If you're not getting reps, it's because either A, you're not healthy, or B, you're not earning them. I think that's how the Saints should operate. I fully expect them to operate that way. And we'll see. We'll see how they do in that regard. But I think that's how they're going to go about it. I think there's no reason to kind of say, hey, you got to go this version. I think there's no right way to do it. I think let them figure it out. Because Payton Turner, unfortunately, is never healthy. Isaiah Foskey hasn't really shown us anything yet. Cam Jordan's getting older. Let the health and production of your players dictate who the odd man out is. As for your second question, is the new tackle any good? Look, let me give you the full breakdown. 2021 starts pretty much the entire season, graded out decently well, but he had a lot of penalties, and that is a concern. 2022 was better, but wasn't a starting guy. He was in a lesser role, but he was better in terms of cleaning up the penalties. And then 2023, which most recent season, He gets injured in week 2, quad injury, season's over. So I think this is a depth signing, and I wouldn't look past anything of that. I think the Saints are taking a chance on a player like this where, similar to Chase Young, but not to the same extent, of you're hoping it works. If not, so be it. But this is not going to be an expensive signing for the Saints. I see this as more as depth. I think this could be maybe if we lose Pete in free agency, here's a guy that can play guard, can play tackle, so you get some flexibility out there on the O-line. So that's the way I see it. And I wouldn't look past anything other than that. That's the way I see it. But for anyone asking, again, the Saints bring in Oli Udoh, played for the Vikings the last couple of seasons. That's the other signing they made this Monday. It was first reported by Ari Myrov. You guys might know him as the My Sports Update guy that gives all those NFL news on social media. Shaquille says, if Jane Daniels is there when we pick at 14, do we go QB? So I'm going to be honest. I think there is no way he is there. No way he's there at 14. That said, let's play in this scenario, right, that you brought up, which is a fun one. Yeah, I think you got to take him. If he's the number one guy on the Saints board at 14 and he's a quarterback and you can take him and you don't even have to start him this season. You can literally let him sit. Yeah, I would do it. Now, I don't expect him to be there at 14. I think he's going to Washington. I think Jaden is done a great job. No player has improved their stock the way Jaden has. Kind of similar to what Burrow did years ago, right? Burrow was not supposed to be a first-round pick and then balls out and is the unquestioned number 1 pick. I think Jaden's put him in a position to be the number 2 pick. But I think that if you were in this scenario, which I don't expect to happen, but let's say it did, I think you would have to go with him at 14. You say, screw everything else, get the young quarterback in the building. Nola Gang Podcast says, who dat, Chris and fam? Who dat? Brian says, is having Chase almost like still having Davenport? I think it's a little different. I think the concerns are the same. So I do like that you bring that up, Brian. I think the concerns are the same, right? What was the concern with Davenport? Health, energy. What's the concern with Chase Young? Health, energy. The difference is, though, which is the huge one, is, and it always matters where you're drafted, how you're drafted, what are the circumstances, but Davenport was at the disadvantage of being labeled 2 first, being taken when the Saints were a piece away from winning a Super Bowl, and in the same draft where the Saints could have drafted Lamar and been the eventual successor of Drew Brees. So I think that circumstance, all those right there, killed him, absolutely killed him. So Chase doesn't have that type of pressure that a guy like Marcus Davenport had, but the similarities are there. I do think the similarities are there. Now, I do think Chase is a better football player, but the concerns, they're the same exact ones. Shaquille says, do you think DA will release full offensive play call in a Kubiak? DA doesn't seem to keep defense stellar, trying to run both. And how do you feel about bringing Juice back as a vet receiver, if even to help with our younger receivers? So as for the DA Kubiak question, I think that you're absolutely going to see him give full control to Kubiak. Now, I think that he kind of learned his lesson this past offseason in terms of you can't have both, right? You can't want to call the defense and tell your offense coordinator, I would like us to be this style of team. You got to let them dictate the flow of the game. And I think Kubiak's going to do that. And I think that for DA to go out there and get a guy like Kubiak, who was high on other teams' radars, not just the Saints, I think that tells you that he is going to do what is going to preserve his job. And what is going to preserve his job is winning football games and being competitive. And that's the type of signing you make. Now, it might not work. This move may not work. I cannot sit here today, guys, and tell you that Clint Kubiak is going to be the guy that fixes the Saints. But I don't expect DA to interfere too much offensively. I think the Saints are doing what is going to help them be the best complementary team. And if it works, great. If not, we're going to have a whole new coaching staff in the building next year. As for the Jarvis Landry question, I love Jarvis Landry as a football player. I think he's had a hell of a career. I think his career is just about over, though. And I think if the Saints are going to bring in a vet receiver who's going to primarily play in the slot, you're going to go with Hunter Renfrow for 2 reasons. A, he most recently played in the NFL. And B, he has the connection with Derek Carr, and there will be familiarity and, being comfortable on 3rd downs when you got to pick up the first and move the chains. He would feel comfortable going to him. So that would be the guy if you're going to add another vet. Now, right now, you got Olave, you got Shaheed, you got A.T. Perry, and you added Cedric Wilson, who knows the Kubiak system, so that's a huge plus. So if the Saints want another vet, I would guess it'll be Hunter Renfrow. Mello says, we keep Lattimore. We'll see. I certainly hope so. Jerry's saying Lattimore stays. Mel saying Chase is still very young. Let him develop. I don't even see it as about the develop thing. I think it's just the energy thing. I think it's the effort thing. Because you didn't see that effort in the NFC Championship game, and you immediately saw that effort in the Super Bowl, and he was a damn good player in the Super Bowl. And there were a lot of moments where he was right there in Patrick Mahomes' face. And at the end of the day, the Niners lost to the best quarterback arguably ever, and that's no slight. So I don't think it's about development, in my opinion. And I'm not saying that Chase can't use polishing. He can. I think it's about making sure you're doing everything in your power to be the best football player every single Sunday, which I think Chase sometimes cannot do. But we'll see. Maybe the Saints get it out of him. Ryan says Chase Young will explode this year and be a dark horse for sack leader of the league. Look, I love that prediction. I would love for that to happen. Is it on the bolder side? Yes. But hey, look, it's Monday. It's the offseason. Saints just made an exciting signing. This is absolutely the time to be bold and talk about what he could potentially do. And the potential is there for him to be a great player. We saw it in his rookie year, right? He was great from the jump with Washington. I wonder what it looks like if he doesn't tear his ACL year 2, because that definitely set him back. Mike says, what's up, Chris? Hope life is great. I'm stoked on Chase Young. There's virtually no risk here, and the upside is immense. Imagine the Predator hitting his potential in NOLA. Exciting as can be. Yeah, I agree. You said it better than I ever could, right? You add a guy, a former number 2 pick to this team, and if it does not work, gone. If it works, let's talk about extending this dude, because the Saints have to find their next pass rusher after Cam Jordan. I think Carl Granderson's been good for this team. I think Carl Granderson will continue being good for this team, but he needs someone across from him. And unfortunately, the Peyton Turner, the draft pick never worked out. The Davenport draft pick never worked out. So far, Foskey hasn't worked out, but let's give him time. He is a second-round pick just from last season. So we'll see what happens. Greg says, think they go after Justin Simmons now? I would love for them to go after Justin Simmons, but we'll see. We shall see if that happens. I think Justin Simmons makes a lot of sense for the Saints, but he could be expensive. I think there's a reason he's still been out there on the market. So I want to kind of wait on that. I think that there's a reason that Simmons hasn't been signed yet. If the number goes down, let's go for it. But if not, we shall see. Psychic Firefighter says, I'm sure Carolina offered more money, so he wants to be here. We'll see. Well, I did see a report he wanted to work with Cam Jordan. So that is a plus. Saints have worked well with Ohio State guys. I think that's a plus. I think Saints have been a good spot for a lot of defensive free agents, minus guys like Jarvis Byrd. But, Carolina pivoted. And I don't know what the reason was being. Maybe they didn't want to wait for Chase for these visits. And the guys that they brought in didn't need a visit. Maybe that's what it was. But either way, was linked to the Panthers. Anytime you can get someone who was going to go to the rival, you'll take that. Caesar says, if Chase has a good year, do you think the Saints will re-sign him? Depends how good. But if he has a great year, like if he has 12 sacks, I think the Saints will try to extend him. Because if he has 12 sacks, I think that we finally found Chase Young, or the Saints finally got a way to get Chase Young to play his best football. But if he has like 6 sacks, 7 sacks, and it's just not a productive year, or if he's just not getting consistent pressure, if he's injured, no. But let's go into this fall, with optimism about Chase Young. If it doesn't work out, guess what? He's gone. So you pivot. But let's go in with some optimism. Margaret says, too much. Young hasn't done anything since his rookie year. Look, I still think his rookie year was his best season, which is disappointing and a little alarming. As for the too much thing, I don't know. Like 1 year, $13 million. It's not a long-term commitment. Since it is fully guaranteed, the Saints could, if they want, pay all that money this year and not put any void years. And they will be, in terms of the future caps, it'll be easier for them to be compliant. So I'm not going to I'm not going to look into it too much and say it's a bad deal. I think it's a fine deal. Mello says this team definitely got better. We're definitely a 10-game. I'm guessing you're going to be a 10-win team this year at least. I don't know. I'm not going to go into that for one reason. I thought the Saints would be 10-7 this past season, or 11-6, because I thought they had a really easy schedule. But they played a lot of crappy quarterbacks. I thought this team was going to play complimentary football. They did none of those until the last month of the season. But was that fool's gold, or was that a sign of things to come? The cautious person in me is thinking that was fool's gold with a little bit of good football. But we shall see. But I don't want to put a number on this team yet. We got to see the draft. We got to see how they play to start the year. And after last season, I don't know if I'll ever put a number like that on this team again. I don't know if I can trust them. ND Matrix says he had 8 sacks last year, same as Granderson, 6 more than Cam Jordan. So I believe it was 5 with the Commanders, 2.5 with the Niners. And then I know he had a sack in the Super Bowl. So, to your point, would still be their second best pass rusher right after Carl Granderson. So it is an upgrade. The question will be how much and how much of an impact does he have, Nam says we definitely getting O-line in the draft after the signing. I'd agree. I think that's going to happen. Brian says Juice ain't coming back. Also agree with that. Ed says Chase played at a high-level D1 school. Davenport was a reach. Off topic, American Society of Magical Negroes was a terrible movie. I did not see that. I know that came out. I did see Love Lies Bleeding. I thought that was excellent. And I actually did earlier today, because I'm off on Mondays, I went to see Dune Part 2 for a third time. Call me sick. I don't care. That movie's fantastic. But yeah, look, again, it's a different circumstance, right? Chase Young going out of Ohio State. We expected greatness. Marcus Davenport, everyone was kind of like, what the hell? Why would you make this pick? Brian says, what's the holdup on Renfro? I think it's a wide receiver market thing in general. I think because this wide receiver class is so loaded, I think that, the veterans are struggling to find teams, because a lot of teams are probably saying, hey, why would I add an aging wide receiver when I can just go add a young guy who will still be on a controllable contract? The unknown is intriguing, and I can get them to learn my system, and that's the only thing they're going to know. So I think guys like Renfro, guys like Michael Thomas, guys like Odell Beckham, I think it's going to be kind of tough at the start to find that next deal. But, the reason I will say that I still feel like Renfro goes to the Saints is I don't think Ian Rappaport makes mistakes. And when he got released, the first thing he said was, let's see what New Orleans does. Now, can Renfro go elsewhere? Absolutely. But I think for Rappaport to throw that out there, when we know that the Saints had interest in Renfro before the deadline, just feels like a seamless fit. And that would be another guy. You could go 1-year deal. If it doesn't work, you're off of him. And I don't think he'll be expensive because he hasn't been that productive since his Pro Bowl season in 2021. Lou says, Jordan Schultz reported the recruiting pitch started at dinner last night with Tyrann Mathieu, Dennis Allen, Joe Woods, and D-line coach Todd Grantham. So, look, that is in terms of defensive talent and coaching, I think that is a very intriguing sell. And look, I know Dennis Allen's easy to dunk on. I am like Blake Griffin when it comes to dunking on Dennis Allen. So, I'm not one to talk. I dunk on him quite often. But he is a very good defensive coach, and I can see how a meeting like that, it's very easy to persuade a guy like Chase Young. Jason says, I saw Chase Young in person in D.C., and he is a beast. I don't deny that, man. I do not deny that. Brian says, we all love Lattimore, but you got to trade him while he has value. He can't help you when he's out, at least out at week 6 and doesn't return. What I will say to that, Brian, and that's always kind of been my opinion on the Lattimore situation, is what's the value? If you're getting 4th-round pick offers, just keep him. I don't need the 4th-round pick. I'd rather him just be out there. If you're getting a day 2 pick, an early day 2 pick, because I don't think the Saints would get a 1st-round pick for Lattimore, and it's kind of because what you just alluded to, the injuries. But if you never had the injuries, he probably isn't on the trade block anyway. But if the Saints can get like a top 50 pick, I probably would move on from Lattimore, because the Saints are entertaining it. And if you're already entertaining it, you're already thinking about it. If you're already thinking about the split, let's get it over with. So I do agree with you. A lot of it comes down to value. But if the value's not there, though, and all they get is like a 4th rounder, I probably would just keep Lattimore. Ryan says he's still not 100, but when he gets there and learning besides Cam, he'll do great. He explodes off the line. We'll see, man. I really hope that he does. ABJ504 says, could we draft Jerry Rice's kid? I mean, of course they could. I don't know if they will. I think Brandon Rice is an intriguing guy. Big-bodied wide receiver. Just had his best year at USC. So we'll see. We'll definitely see what happens. But I don't know if that's going to be a guy that the Saints are going to go after. I'm curious, though, because I think he'll give them a new mold. He'll give them a different type of receiver. Right now, the Saints got a lot of those twitchy guys. I think they need to get guys that can go in and be great after the catch, which reminds me, if the Saints are going to go for that, I think Xavier Legette is a very interesting guy. I think the other receiver, too, I got to remember, I think it was Malachi Corley from Western Kentucky. That's another guy after the catch making plays. So those would probably be guys that I look at the wide receiver spot, because I think the Saints are going to need a yak guy, kind of the way the Niners have had. Shaquille says, I definitely understand the anger with the fans last year, but Who Dat Nation, we cannot sell our tickets like this. There were too many visitor fans in the Dome last year. Look, I think it's all relative whether they're winning or losing. If the Saints are a shit show, I mean, I can't tell fans to do with their money or tickets anyway. It's not my business. But I understand the frustration if the Saints are just abysmal. But if they go into like week 1 and they have a home game and there's not a lot of fans there, then that's not a good look, obviously, for the fan base, for the city. Just obviously would be tough. I'm shocked Mike T hasn't been signed. Your thoughts on why he hasn't visited or signed anywhere yet? Look, I think part of it is health. Part of it is the interest around the league. I don't know if the interest is going to be huge for Michael Thomas. And the other thing goes back to what I said with the draft. I would not be surprised if Mike gets a deal done soon. I'd be very happy for him. But I also wouldn't be surprised if guys like Mike wait until after the draft. What team missed a receiver and needs to add someone for a year? There you go. So that's kind of the way I view it. I think Mike and Odell Beckham are kind of in the same boat right now. You know they're talented, but they're older. They're not that healthy. And, you know, Father Time kind of gets us all, especially when it comes to football. So I think that that's kind of what the reason for the lack of interest at the moment. But, you know, things could change in a bit. Only takes one team for Michael Thomas to fall in love with him, and all of a sudden he's back on a roster. ND Mage says somebody's got to be left out. They have so many wide receivers this year, 7 with a first-round grade. Oh, if you're talking about, I guess you're talking about Coleman out of FSU. I don't know. You could say someone's going to be left out, or you could say there's going to be a crazy run on wide receivers. I think it go either way. This is a very, very good class. So it's possible, man. Bayou Swamp Man says, who dat? Who dat? Ed saying, I've seen Dune twice. It's masterpiece. I agree. Look, I know, like I said before, I went for a third time. I might go for a fourth. Don't call the cops on me. ABJ 504. Coleman's a better prospect, but Rice is a good slot receiver. Yeah, Coleman's definitely a better prospect. Rice is intriguing, though. And what I will say about Rice, and the only reason I wouldn't dismiss it, Senior Bowl guy, Saints love Senior Bowl guys. We cannot discredit the way they've attacked the Senior Bowl prospects. Greg says, got to get Penix in round 2. Don't have to, but if they like him and he's there. I mean, we just watched the man in the college football playoff throw dimes in the Superdome. So I'm not against it. Bayou Swanman says, are there any safeties in the draft that you can see us grabbing to be good enough to play right away? Well, I know the kid from Minnesota, was it Tyler Nubin? I think he's a really, really, really nice prospect. He's probably the best prospect there. I like Cole Bishop from Utah a lot. He's a guy that when I watched, he kind of jumped off the page to me. I still got to watch the kid from Georgia, so I can't give you a full evaluation on him yet. But guys that I like the safety position that I wrote down, I know I like Bishop. I love the Minnesota tight end. I liked Evan Williams from Oregon. I thought he looked pretty decent. So I definitely got a couple more that I got to watch. But those were some for me that stood out. But I'm not entirely sure the Saints will go safety that early. So we'll see. Brian says going to hurt if they trade Lattimore. It's a tough decision. It would hurt. You know, I think guys like that, where you have an attachment to them because of what they've accomplished. Yeah, of course, that would hurt, but it's a business. And I think for me, ever since the Jimmy Graham trade, I don't think there's a trade that'll ever hurt me, you know, as a Saints fan. Chase says Kubiak's a good offensive coordinator. We shall see. I think he's going to be good for them, but we'll see. Max says, what's up, Chris? What's up, Mac? Brian mentions Roman Wilson from Michigan. I like Roman Wilson a lot. I love guys with that kind of championship pedigree, and he's got it. He really has it. So I would not mind that at all. Brian says, would love Jordan Travis in the 5th round. I wonder where he's at with his recovery, but the intrigue is there with a guy like that. No doubt about it. Max says, we ain't drafting a QB. Don't get your hopes up, y'all. Yeah, I mean, I didn't expect them to. You know, I mean, they just signed Nathan Peterman, guys. We cannot expect them to draft a quarterback. No, but, you know, I just don't expect it, you know? Lady St. Irvin says, do you think DA, Carr, and MT can make up and MT comes back for a 1-year deal? I don't see it. I think MT, you know, it's the part of him that makes him great, but it's the part of him that gives him a weakness. You just can't call out and air out the team on social media and expect everything to be okay, right? I thought once he aired out Derek Carr complaints, that was like the end of it. But then he goes out and he airs out, you know, the team, the culture, airing out Jeff Duncan, which, look, I don't care if he airs out Jeff Duncan. That's none of my business. I really can't give two shits. But, like, when you air out the team and it sounds like you're taking shots at the coach, there's just no shot he's going to come back. I would be stunned if he comes back. One Smoke says, I just want Brock Bowers. I don't blame you, man. I'd love to see Brock Bowers on the Saints. Brian says, what's your gut feeling that the Saints do with the 14th pick? My gut feeling is O-line. Offensive tackle is my gut feeling. ABJ 504, any late round tight end you see us getting I can see the Saints going 1 into 6. I like Eric All from Iowa a lot. He's a guy you got to be patient with, though, man. Back injury 2 years ago, ACL injury last year. So, like, he is never healthy, and that's a concern. But I think if this kid was healthy, I think he would be drafted higher than where he's going to go. Now, if you want a tight end that, like, I think is really intriguing, but I don't think he's going to be late round. I think he's going to be, like, second, third round. I would go with Ben Sinnott or Ben. I think it's Sinnott, or I don't know how you pronounce it, but the kid from Kansas State, and I will get the pronunciation right. He is really intriguing to me. When I looked at him, you can line him up in multiple spots. He's good after the catch, makes plays in space. You can use him in the screen game. He would be a really intriguing prospect, in my opinion. Lady St. Irvin said Graham trade hurt, but definitely. But I loved Max Unger. Yeah, Max Unger was great for them. Kalen Bullock for safety is really good. I'll get into that for sure. That was definitely one of the guys that I had on my list of I got to get to them. But I'm curious to see, right? Because USC's defense wasn't very good, but I'm sure he'll stand out then. Brian says idea at 14, Bowers, Turner if they're there, but I'm starting to get on the offensive tackle train. I kind of think that's where they go. But look, if Bowers is there at 14 or Dallas Turner's there, Saints are going to have a decision to make. That will put him in the blender. Christian said, who's your dream pick? It's still Bowers for me. I just love the idea of giving Derek Carr another weapon that is just so unique. And look, if Derek Carr can't make it work, and there's a good chance he can't, look, man, you know he's not your quarterback. But guess what? Whoever comes in next, you give them Brock Bowers, you give them Shaheed, you give them Olave. They got something to work with. There's a core there, you know? Max saying, imagine Bowers on one side and Juwan on the other. Yeah, and look, I think that the Saints need to get better at the tight end position. So that's a dream pick because I think he's the most exciting. But if Joe Alt's fell, wouldn't that be a dream? I think Olu Fashanu, who we got another person in the chat here saying that they would like him. Fashanu is a damn good player too. So Saints go offensive tackle. I know that's not going to sit well with some people. I would be okay with it. I think they need to get better on offensive tackle. ND Matrix says, not sure if we go wide receiver first 2 rounds with Shaheed, Olave, A.T. Perry, and Wilson Jr. Yeah, I just don't see it. I think that they're gonna go. Look, if one falls, then yes, but I think they're gonna go tackle, maybe interior D line. You know. Lou says I would like us to get Ladd McConkey. Man, I think Ladd McConkey would be awesome. He would be awesome. Don't know if it'll happen. Don't think it'll happen, but Ladd's a baller for sure. What do you think about Bell, the tight end from FSU? I think he's intriguing. He's actually on my list that I have. Where the hell's... So I got a book over here. And in this book, I got a bunch of prospect names that are on my watch list, I find them intriguing list. And he's actually on that intriguing one. So, look, I think if the Saints are going to go late round tight end, there's like a plethora of options. That would be one of them for sure. That tight end from Colorado State, and if I can't get Bowers, give the kid the Saints met with from Texas. Texas has some dogs this year. Some dogs. You want a dog at tight end, they got it. You want one at receiver, they got it. You want an interior D-line, they got it. Which is part of the reason why they made the playoff. Agree with the O-line for the first pick, whether you like it or not, judging by the Saints drafters, they like drafting players in the trenches first. They do. I mean, they just did last year. Brian Brzee, before that, Trevor Penning. Years before that, Cesar Ruiz, Peyton Turner. Like the Saints usually go with an interior guy, whether it's O-line, D-line. Theo Johnson from Penn State is going to be really good. Yeah, he's another tight end that I think is very intriguing. Kind of fits that basketball background, can make plays over the middle. He's going to be an intriguing player. I think you got to have patience with a guy like Theo Johnson, but I think he can be good. Max says, we also signed Udo right after the Chase Young news broke with a question mark. Yeah, they did. We'll see what happens with him. I think that's really a depth signing, but that's something they got to do, right? Because you might lose Pete. And you got to add talent to this O-line, you know? Greg says, I think the Saints need another big wide receiver. We have a bunch of small guys. I do agree with that. And again, they need a guy after the catch. Xavier Legette, if he's there at 45, wouldn't he be fun, man? Wouldn't he be fun? Brian says, I can see them getting wide receiver and linebacker on UDFAs. They've had success with wide receiver, you know? They've had success. Shaheed, Deontay Hardy. So I would not be surprised if they go add another one. We could reach for a wide receiver in 5th round. We have at least 3 5th-round picks. They could. They can move up with one of them if they want. Bad Juju says, do you think we have a problem drafting offensive, defensive linemen in early rounds, scouting-wise? I think defensive linemen, the problem is the Saints have a prototype, and right now that prototype is not working. Davenport didn't work. Peyton Turner can't stay healthy. O-line? I don't know. I think that O-line's a little bit of a mixed bag because I think the Saints have drafted really good O-linemen, right? I think of Armstead, think of a guy like Carl Nix, think of a guy like Zach Strief, even Pete. We joke about Pete, but Pete's been an NFL player for such a long time, so I don't really see that as a bust. But Penning obviously has been a bust so far. Ruiz, all the good work he did a year ago, kind of undid it this past year. I'm still on the fence about him. McCoy's been good. So it's a mixed bag. I don't think O-line I'm as concerned about. D-line, I think it's the prototype that they have is what really hurts them. Mello says, who do you think our first two picks should be? I don't really have a, these two guys should be the first two picks. But I think the Saints got to get better at defensive line, interior-wise, and got to get better at the O-line and need to get another weapon. So can they address two out of those three needs with pick 14 and 45? That's what I want to see. Mike says, do you have your guy that you hope the Saints take in the first? Like I said before, I would love to see Bowers on this team, but look, if the Saints are ending up with a guy like Fashanu, I'd be cool with that. If they end up with Dallas Turner, I'd be great with that. If they take Fuaga from Oregon State, I'd be okay with that. So, I'm not really picky. If they get Latu from UCLA and they go edge again, so be it. Like, the older I get, the less picky I get with prospects. I just want these guys to pan out for the Saints. Brian says, I'll eat crow. I was a Brzee doubter, but he is pretty good. He is. Lou mentions Tyler Boyd. Tyler Boyd would be an interesting one, man. If there is a good quarterback in the first round, do you go for it? Look, the philosophy for me is if there's a guy that's so high on your board, like if the Saints are at 14 and the best guy on their board is QB, and they love this QB, and I don't anticipate this happening, but let's say that's the case, you should go QB. I think it's the smart thing to do. Mike mentions that Ramczyk, first round pick too. It's your point, right? So I think they've been more hits than bad for the Saints in O-line, I would say. Brian says the Saints won't make four fifth-round picks. They'll package those and move up. I agree for 1,000%. Bundle 2 fifths for a fourth-round pick. Yeah, that can happen. Absolutely can happen. Chase Young, excited to be a Saint. So I guess that comes from Nick Underhill, according to Saints 41. Yeah, look, and I think Saints fans should be excited for Chase Young. You had talent, you had youth for the price of $13 million, but only 1 year, no long-term commitment. So we'll see what happens, but this was exciting. Saints start off the Monday with a signing that could pay big dividends for this team. Maybe it doesn't, but I think that there's optimism here. But I'm going to wrap it up here, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll have more Chase Young content later today, whether it's via Twitter or X, I guess, that we call it, or TikTok. So I'll definitely go into more of that. I'll pull up some of the inconsistencies, some of the strengths for him, and we'll go from there. But this is a really intriguing signing for the Saints. And it's definitely the biggest move they made so far in free agency. Once again, guys, thank you so much for tuning in and giving your thoughts. I really appreciate hearing from you guys. If you guys want more live streams this offseason, let me know, and we'll definitely get back to doing that here at Boot Crew Media. In the meantime, guys, make sure to subscribe, like this video, and stay tuned for more content from the Straight Up Saints podcast, the destination for the Who Dat Nation.